Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. Delighted to have you here. This is Comprehensivist Wednesdays that we do in conjunction with the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. So welcome. Today, we are going to be talking about comprehensivism, and this is going to be highly interactive. I actually want to hear from you. What has been your approach, your experience with comprehensivism? What kind of experiences, what kind of ideas, what kind of heroes that you found that have enabled you to be more comprehensive in your approach? Comprehensivism is simply ability to go across fields and to learn from one field and apply it to another field. It's being kind of transdisciplinary, having concepts that go across. I have always appreciated that, my mind naturally works like that. So I was the first person that I was really enthralled by was Leonardo Da Vinci. I spent a lot of time. I traveled a lot. I went to Louvre. I went to UCLA, where he has his Codex Atlanticus. So he was one. Then Louis Sullivan was another one. And there have been many people. And I like people like Charlie Munger, who actually conceptualized this very well. He has this idea of tool belt. He says, you should go to every field and get the core ideas, which you can apply to any field. So you're actually building a tool belt, and you keep only those tools which can be used on anything. These are universal tools. Louis Sullivan says that he learned that it's the universal ideas which are the most powerful ideas, because they are abstracted from everything and they're applicable to everything. So they've got immense power. And so that's his take on it. Of course, Buckminster Fuller has been a big influence, very recent influence. So it hasn't gotten into my system as much as these other folks. So that's kind of briefly about my experience. So that's why when Joe introduced me to CJ, I was very excited, because CJ has been on this quest of what he calls it's his comprehensivist project, collaboration for comprehensivism. And the idea is that, and this is what we are doing today. It's highly collaborative, because I want to hear from each person of their own experience, and hopefully each of us will learn something from the others. So I'm going to open it up for any kind of comments on this. So this is an invitation to share your experience about comprehensivism. We've got 4 rules as always. Go ahead and type ! in chat in order to share. Number 2, keep on topic. We're talking about comprehensivism. Number 3, be brief. You can take up to 3 to 5 minutes this time, because I want to do it in kind of high definition. And then 4th, feel free to disagree, speak your mind, disagree with anybody on anything, and do so courteously. So those are the ground rules. And what we'll do is that we'll have everybody talk. I'm going to keep track of everything everybody says. And we'll try to look at kind of common patterns that emerge from everything that is being said. And we will talk about them briefly, and then we'll do a lightning round of questions and answers. So bring up the best question, keep track. I strongly always recommend this high technology of pen and paper. It's very effective, very powerful. It's only about 5,000 years old, but it has changed people's lives. So even if you're not particularly tech savvy, I think you should start using it. Because there is really no other way of keeping track of complex ideas and organizing them, and writing down your best thoughts and best questions, so we can leverage all of it. All right, so I'm going to open it up to the floor. Who would like to go? Who would like to share their experience with comprehensivism, the ideas that have helped them, or any kind of heroes that they've learned a lot from? go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you'd like to share. Yes, Joe, go ahead.
So I'm just coming at this just my initial thoughts.
Sure.
It's been extremely beneficial. I think I've enjoyed the systems thinking approach the most, whether it be Buckminster Fuller or Russell Acuff, and I also appreciate what CJ and Sanjay have both brought to the Comprehensivist Wednesdays, and one talking about the brain and the other one talking about modeling, and how those two actually work together. You know, and CJ's brought it from a very abstract level, but he's I feel like in recent his recent model that he presented was much that it aligned with things like the OODA loop, were very beneficial for me personally. And it's really showed me, the thing that Comprehensivist Wednesdays has showed me also is the power and the limits of analogical thinking. You know, that there is a lot of value to be able to think in generalized principles, but there are some limits to them when you start applying them to real world problems. And I think that that's something that it's really important for me to understand going forward, because sometimes you think you understand something by just drawing an analogy out, but that's just the starting point for which you can actually start to extract value and start to apply those values to, like, where you went right and where you went wrong when applying it to a problem. There are also, I've enjoyed thoroughly your 4 systems model and the principle, and specifically the principles presentation. I also liked it when, I don't know if this is Comprehensivist Wednesdays, but it was when we were connecting the dots. That might have been on Tuesday. So anyway, that's a little bit different. So all of these have helped me at least start to ask better questions. And that's been ultimately it's helped me focus and to approach problems in a more, from an abstract level to a more concrete level. And so that I find all these, Lewis Sullivan as well, I found to be extremely beneficial to me, even though I'm still learning that. One of these days I'll be able to properly explain it, I promise. So those are my initial thoughts. I'll have some more. I just needed to pull some up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So.
Excellent. So I mean, this is very, very good stuff. And what I want to do is that I want to start connecting. And one of the thoughts I have is to start connecting all of these things as people put these different elements on the table. You know, what's the connection between the systems thinking, asking better questions, being cognizant of what our brain is, the OODA loop, form follows function, you know, the 4 systems model, you know, how are all these connected and how do we use them all together? So folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark to share your thoughts. The more of your thoughts you put on the table, the more you're going to get from the discussion, because we're going to take in everything that everybody's saying and then build on it. So next up is going to be Dave, followed by L. Dave.
Thanks, Shrikant, for hosting an interesting topic tonight. I'll mention a couple of things as you did, but from the OODA loop, the other thing that I brought out of that was the disassembly reassembly. And it lets me look at something from a different lens, because I've always heard the story of Henry Ford, I think lived somewhere near Detroit, Michigan, obviously, but went down to Chicago to the stockyards where they would be disassembling pigs. And in a disassembly line, And one guy would cut off a leg, the next guy would cut off a leg, et cetera, et cetera. Next guy would make the incision right down the middle. Next guy would, pull out the guts. And somehow Henry Ford wheels started turning and said, well, instead of a disassembly line, let's have an assembly line. So he started off with a frame, and one guy puts on a wheel, another guy puts on a wheel, and then they drop in the engine, and then here comes the body down, and half an hour later it's driven off the line. And he made millions of Fords and put the whole country on wheels. But it's just amazing that you open your eyes, and it's amazing what you can see sometimes. But the other things I'll mention about comprehensivism that I really enjoyed from this year of 52 Living Ideas is the human development, the self-development. I think you're stressing a lot of these things. That I was raised in the Christian faith, and religion, I think, takes a lot about development. But it was good, and I got a lot out of this year hearing about Jordan Peterson, who I'd not heard of before. I read several other psychologists approaching human development from the secular point of view. And of course, it's amazing how Jordan Peterson can spend a whole year on just Genesis and the Garden of Eden. But it's interesting to see the different approaches. And the other thing I would mention as far as comprehensivism is I think people realize I'm a member of Veterans for Peace, and I've studied PTSD and read about 15 different books on the subject and about the Vietnam War. And it was interesting how each person had a little different take, a little different point of view, was in a different part of the war. It talked to different veterans. So I think the more we get in depth in almost any subject, the more we learn and the more expert we get. But anyway, I'm looking forward to a pleasant evening. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. I like all of these points. I mean, one is that I think self-development is the theme of this. Kind of comprehensivism is a means to doing that. So relentlessly trying to improve yourself is the goal. And you're trying, and definitely I like your point about the connection between the religious way of doing it and the secular way of doing it. And there is a commonality to it, because religion is the kind of the earlier way of doing it. So that was one. Secondly, I really like your connecting Swift. Swift was the guy who invented, the disassembly line in the Chicago stockyards, and completely transformed food industry of actually putting meat on the table. He's the guy who actually figured out that, and refrigeration and stuff like that. So it's interesting making the connection between disassembly and assembly. And you connected that to OODA loop, and that's heart of it. You kind of, otherwise you hold your concepts as given, as conceptual structure as given. You have to be prepared to destroy it, prepared to take it apart, so that you can put it back together. So actually creation starts with destruction. That is Boyd's insight, that you have to be willing to take apart things so that you can put them together. You take apart many different conceptual systems, and then you put them back together in a better way. Also, I like the point about kind of going deep into it. And I think one of the things that was implicit, or partly explicit and partly implicit in what you're saying, is that actually interacting with a group of people, as you do, as we do here, in depth, with a common purpose, you can learn a lot than you can do by yourself. So great points. Thank you, Dave. Next up is going to be Elle, Michael, and Max. Elle.
Yes, thanks, Shrikant. Yes, my heroes, I would say, are Albert Einstein, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, because of women's rights. She goes back to 1815, and she did some amazing things in Seneca Falls. And also Nelson Mandela, because of his work with rights and paving the way for people to be able to express themselves in modes such as even this one. And I'm grateful to Buckminster Fuller for his work, and of course CJ, and Jordan Peterson as well. And that's all I really had to say right now, and thanks.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Yep.
I think it's very important to be grateful, because that's a way of kind of emphasizing what things mean to you. I mean, for me, people like Louis Sullivan or Leonardo Da Vinci, they're at a height. I mean, what they do is that they actually show you what is possible, because we are enormously complex beings, and we are not born with the knowledge of what is possible to us. And very easily we get caught up in what we are and become creatures of habit. And our current conceptual systems, our current habits limit what we can be. What heroes do, what great people do, is that they show you what is possible. And I like to use metaphors. It's kind of like, you're walking on a plane and you see somebody standing in the middle of nowhere in the midst of a cloud. And you say that, oh, there must be a mountain there that you can possibly climb. You did not know that there was a mountain. You did not know that that height actually existed. And you suddenly see them. It's all covered with fog still. You just, there is a sun that is falling on that person over there, and you can see that it is possible. You don't necessarily know the way to it. But just somebody showing you what is possible, it gives you the knowledge of what is possible. It gives you the inspiration, and then you have to do the climbing. There is no shortcuts. You have to climb yourself. But it's that heroes, and they do that in so many different dimensions. So thank you, Al. Next up is Michael.
Thanks, Shrikant. Really nice to be with everybody. It's my second visit so far. I'm really enjoying myself and thrilled to have found all of you. So I had been teaching chess professionally for the last 30 years, and I had a career in finance in the 90s, and I left. And it's a long story how I got into teaching chess, but I had the opportunity to teach the game in a part of the curriculum here in New York, in a school where they basically said to me, we want you to take the game and attach it to everything we're teaching in the curriculum. And at the beginning, it scared the hell out of me, because I was like, how on earth am I going to do this? And it turned out to become rather easy to do, because whether or not you play chess or not, I mean, if you can think, if you're into athletics, for example, chess is played on an 8x8 grid. So if you're a tennis player, for example, or a basketball player, any sport that you play that has boundaries, you automatically are wired to think that way on the chessboard. If you're a musician, this is something that struck me rather strange, that you can connect chess to music, but all the musicians here tonight, for example, understand harmony very well. When not only when musicians are working well together, but when notes are working well together. In chess, when you're playing the game, your pieces have to harmonize. So as a chess player, someone who's constantly, especially if you're competitive, you're constantly trying to harmonize your pieces and create disharmony in your opponent's camp. And then, this obsession of connecting the game, it just kept spreading and spreading. I'm a fan of improv comedy. So I'm standing in front of a room full of, say, 12-year-old students, and the teacher would say, okay, we're doing a series on archaeology, for example. Go. Now I have a chess demo board behind my head, and over time I realized that in any given chess position, you have structure, you have pawn structure that creates a shape. And that is exactly the same, getting a 12-year-old to see, for example, the structure in a dinosaur skeleton, or looking at a fossil. And within that structure, you can actually study things like forensics. For example, if you look at the end of a chess game, you'll see a king somewhere on the board that's been checkmated. But you can actually go back in time and kind of figure out how that player got in trouble by examining the structure that they played on. And I'll leave it at that. I just wanted to introduce the fact that, in my opinion, to have a comprehensive view, it's important to have a tool. And that tool for me was chess and the teaching of the game, and then developing or having the fascination of trying to connect it to just about anything in my life. And, in the future, I'll share more of that, but that's, I felt a good starting point.
Wonderful, Michael. That's fantastic. Actually, one of my favorite books is called Art of Learning by Josh Wetskin.
Fantastic.
And I'm actually planning to do a meetup on that. Joe, I was planning to do it on Tuesday, but I want to speak more. So I'm going to move that to Sunday. So Sunday at 2:30, I will do this meetup. And it's exactly the point that Michael is making. What Josh does is that he's a master of chess at a very early age. If you've watched the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer, that's Josh. And the most interesting thing, so he describes his, really in beautiful detail, his adventure in chess. But the really fascinating thing is that he has a second career in martial arts. And he talks about the art of learning, what is involved in actually learning. He connects up what he learned from chess and how he learned chess with how he learned martial arts. And it's pretty incredible stuff. So don't miss it. What I will have is that I have a short interview, a video, about 10-minute video of Josh introducing the idea. And then this is very rare to be able to find this for a book, but I have a very detailed summary of the book, summary notes of the book by somebody who's done a fantastic job of actually summarizing the key ideas in every one of the chapters. And so I want to do a very deep dive into that. So even if you just watch the video, you will get something from it. If you have not heard anything about it, you'll still get from it. But especially if you read the notes, it takes about 40 minutes to read. You will be able to get a lot from the meetups, and it will be basically talking about learning. And the point is the same point that Michael is making, because Michael, that was a fantastic example of saying, because you kind of have to start with something that you know how it works. And so, for example, for you, chess is kind of part of your internal functioning. And then you're bringing that to bear on other things. So many things that you have learned carry over. And that's very powerful. So thank you, Michael. Next up is going to be Max, followed by Brian. Folks, go ahead. I would like to hear what your experience has been about comprehensivism, what ideas you found useful, and the people you have learned from. Max. Max, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay. Yeah, thanks so much. I didn't even know that this was a word before this meetup, so I had to look it up and find out what it was.
I think Buckminster Fuller made it up.
Okay, cool. Well, I feel less foolish now. So yeah, I think with me, as far as and then from the definition, I mainly got it from the polymath word, because that one was more readily available. So, someone who's first across a wide variety of things. So I think the first person who really showed me the power of knowledge was actually for me reading every speech that Dr. Martin Luther King made, because not only did he understand theology in terms of the religions across the board, he also understood social constructs, basic nature, the way the economies are set up and the things like this. And so then not only that did he have this knowledge, but he was able to form that into a way that it served such a purpose, and it was so profound. And you see it again, like reincarnated in a totally different way, like with Jordan Peterson, or like somebody like when Ben Shapiro is on this game. So like someone having a wide variety of like knowledge and learning, to the point where it led me to do this thing where I read one book a week for the last like 2-3 years now. Every book I try to read 52 books a year. So like just in sometime from a whole book, there may be only one sentence which is like profound or tells me something that I didn't know. But like even that one sentence of like inspiration, I think is valuable enough. I would read like a book that's like 1,000 pages. If there was like one paragraph that I was gonna be able to take with me like for the rest of my life, or be able to use that to connect with other people. So like the power of that, the usefulness of that, the effectiveness of that, being able to like construct your thoughts by having your thoughts sometimes mirrored back to you by someone else. Marcus Aurelius, even from like the Stoics, from Seneca, which has been like a really big thing that I'm on now, is Stoicism, and like the power behind that, and also understanding like the social justice side and being able to balance it out and understand probably like some concepts by their converse. So, because some things you only know by looking at the opposite of this thing, which is like really understated in like conversations and in learning these days. But I really found that to be useful. So yeah, that's about it for
Wow.
me.
Thank you, Max. So several things. So one is that, see somebody like Martin Luther King, right? What they do is that they bring such power to everything that they do. It could be a simple sentence, a simple gesture. And because there is so much behind it, it has that simple power. So for example, Mahatma Gandhi, who is a big inspiration for Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela, is like that. You're in the middle of all these people. He takes some very simple actions, simple words, but there is just so much behind it and so much that proceeds from it that he has kind of a completely outsized impact. But it is because it is bringing together, it is kind of resonating how we hear things, it resonating how we feel things, it resonates kind of deep things about human relations, a sense of fairness. And he's just counting on all of that in an integrated way. The second thing is that 52 books a year, I like that. 52, I like that. The idea of doing it on a regular basis, of saying that this is something that is actually important to your personal growth, and making that a systematic part of your life. And that's why I call this 52 living ideas, because the idea is that you ideas are important for you to grow, and you need to kind of keep coming at ideas at least once a week, coming up with something that is going to do the next transformation. On the books, if you're reading so many books, I have a recommendation for you. It's a book called How to Read a Book. If you've not read it, I would recommend it very highly. I've done 3 meetups on it. So if you go to 52 Living Ideas and just search for it, it is a kind of standard issue with my New York meetups here. Several people, because it's what it does is that, let me just talk about it for a minute. The approach it takes is that you have to realize that there are about 20 million books out there, and about maybe 500,000 to 1 million books are being published every year. And a book is an incredible thing. Somebody spends their entire life thinking about something and gives it to you for 20 bucks. I mean, what a deal. Okay. At the same time, your time is limited. And so how do you access this 20 million world of books effectively for your own purpose? And he has very simple ideas. One is called active reading, where you have to set purpose, and clearer your purpose is, and the more actively you read, the more you get from it. And the second idea is that of syntopical reading, which is really the heart of comprehensivism, of saying, follow ideas across other people, across fields, and try to put them together. Try to get the vocabularies, conceptualization, conceptual hierarchies of everybody, connect them to each other, and use that to formulate your own conceptual hierarchy about anything that you're thinking about. It's a very profound idea, the syntopical reading. So that's what the book is about. So I would recommend it very highly to everybody, because for me, it has been a crucial tool of comprehensivism. So thank you, Max. Next up is going to be Brian.
Okay. I think many of us were, when we started these meetups about polymaths, I don't think we had actually come across that word before, or if we had, it didn't register with us. Certainly I was in that situation. But since then, I've noticed it appearing in magazines, books all over the place. Probably I just never picked up on it before. What I'd like to do now is just mention a few of the people that are impacting me or have impacted me in the past. Some are well known, others are not well known. The first one I'll mention is a gentleman called Benjamin Franklin. I read his autobiography decades ago. And it always stuck with me, but I didn't take it any further. I've been following a course, one of the great courses, about the founding of the United States. And he, with a group of other people, he appeared in that. And I decided to go deeper to find out more about him. The next person I would mention is that I always have known, I should know a lot more about his life, but never really found out. His name is Winston Churchill. Much deeper character than most people think, much wider area of expertise. So I've got several books that I'm trying to get through now. The other, well, I won't mention the other one. He's another guy similar to Benjamin Franklin that I found out about, but I'll talk about him another time. What I wanted to mention is a couple of guys whose names you will not know. These are people who I've worked for over the years. The first one was called Jos Kuiper. He was a team leader on a big project I was working on in terms of European civil aviation safety. And I always just assumed that he was a knowledgeable guy and had a wide range of knowledge. I never really would have put him in this class because I didn't really know much about it. But since I've learned about polymathy, he clearly was one. And I appreciate him even more. I mean, he's not around anymore, but the other guy that I worked on another project, a similar project on sort of some satellite projects that we worked on. And his name was Bernay. Again, you'll not have heard of it. But he had such a wide range of knowledge that I was almost daily shocked by the areas where he had expertise in. And these people really affected my life. I learned a lot from them, and I grew by working with them or working for them. So those are the guys that I would mention that have affected me. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian. So I want to say, I think, Brian, I really appreciate you bringing up the point about people that you interact with in your life that have impact on you. And that's certainly been true for me. And that's a huge, huge factor. You know, I have had some friends who are just incredible. And they have shown me what was possible. It's more than that. What happens is that you always have your own limits, and everybody has their own limits. If you have kind of a level of trust with another person, and if they're good, they have limits, but they have different limits. So places where when you see them operating, you see them operating across what you thought was limits. And you say, what is going on here? I thought there was a wall here, and they just seem to walk through it. What's going on? And so there is a lot of opportunity to actually learn from people. And, you know, and it doesn't, and it's all over the place, you know, it doesn't, you know, people can be very simple. People can be a lot younger than you or a lot older than you. And you might get this one point that, like Max was saying, you know, there is this paragraph that you get from a book. It can be just this one little thing, that idea, when added to what you have, that can really make a big difference. So I'm just enormously grateful to the friends that I've had, from whom I've learned a lot. Also, I find the same thing to be true in these kind of conversations, because this is a very odd context. You know, we come here based on shared values. We come from very different backgrounds, very different places, some even from down under. And they come from all over the world, you know, and they're of all kinds of ages, all kinds of kind of experience, all kinds of expertise. And we have a fairly focused discussion on something where we slowly develop kind of enough common knowledge, even enough common values to be able to engage each other at a fairly deep level, which is not usual in most conversations when you've just met someone, unless it's an exceptional situation. So it's, again, the same principle that Brian is talking about learning. To some extent, it applies here too. And I think people are very open and, you know, in sharing what they have learned. So, you know, I'm just enormously grateful to have such quality of people coming here, having this level of discourse. So just definitely kudos to, you know, just tremendous gratefulness for people who have impacted my life in person, in addition to kind of historical figures. I mean, historical figures are very big for me, but I've learned a lot from people that I've interacted with. All right. Now, you're welcome. If somebody else wants to share, they're welcome. Anybody who has not spoken before will get priority over people who have already spoken. But if you want to add anything to what you have already said, you can go ahead and type a exclamation mark. We'll keep getting, you know, we'll keep prioritizing people who have not spoken before. But anybody who wants to speak again is welcome to do that, because, you know, this is a large topic, and each time it's much better to kind of put some fairly focused things down and then come back and speak. Next up is Julie. Julie, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to give it another try. I'm going to talk about polymath, and anybody who's talked to me knows that I'm all about doing purpose, living according to your purpose. And to me, a polymath is a person living on purpose, who just is a certain way of living. It's living from your own personal truth and letting your own curiosity and passions guide you, despite all the forces that discourage it in growing up. And I think polymaths just follow that, and they're so busy on that plane that they don't buy into the fact that it can't be done. A lot of times you look at polymaths and you say it kind of incredulously, and say, and we maybe might say, how can they manifest 4 to 5 careers in a lifetime? And we might call them drifters, or assume they must take shortcuts and compromise the quality of or mastery of their work. Or they're restless and all over the place. But I would contend that true polymaths are among the most unified and congruent within themselves, because they haven't given into all the forces of a fear-based world. And they're the least likely to bounce between our current self and our ideal self, because I don't think they ever left their ideal self. And it's a powerful way to operate. I believe that they tap into some powers that are beyond the earthly limits, in their inspiration, in their ideas, in the quality of whatever work they're doing. And you could tell when you meet somebody who's working for the love of the work, and when they're just doing it for the money, you can feel it. It is powerful, and it is contagious, and it spreads, and it lifts other people up into their own light. Among my heroes would be, and the reason why, the fact is, these are the exceptions and not the rule. Most people are not living a purpose, and most people are not true polymaths. Most of them are drifters. They're discontent. They're searching outside. And that's why I consider the work of Kim Murrow, who we've had in the meetups, and Les Brown, people that are even life coaches, Montessori education, to keep our children in an environment where they can step into their authentic power and gifts, or the harder job of getting us back in touch with it. And I am so powerfully supportive of this type of work that I think it's the shortcut, the quickest shortcut to so many of the answers to the world's problems. Mostly because when people are coming from their authentic power, they are in a state of flow, and the power of that is the fear just drops off. And it's not necessarily their work; it could be speaking their truth. It's just a really powerful place, and I think that world peace would be a side effect of that kind of work. So maybe I'm finding some passion here of my own here. Thanks.
Thank you, Julie. Appreciate that. So I would say a couple of things. One is, I mean, you made the point about that they love what they do. I think that is very fundamental, because, and you can see that in them, that they actually love what they're doing. The other thing is that I've never really liked the word polymath, because it is a reaction to monomath, or it's saying that it's something unusual. Okay, but I don't think it is actually unusual. You know, you look at a child is interested in things, and they kind of, their attention, work naturally flows. They don't say, is this my field or is it outside the field? No, it's world, it's reality, it's nature, it's everything is yours, and you're just kind of going into it. So in that sense, a true polymath, for them, it's not a big deal. It's simply that they are interested in life, and they will follow all connections wherever they lead. So there is nothing really, it's not like, okay, I'm now going to take in this field. No, you're just, it's between you and the world, and you're enthralled with the world, and you're trying to understand it, and you're just following it wherever it goes. So in that sense, it's the most natural. And I think children are a classic example. I think Buckminster Fuller also makes that point. Anytime you kind of are lost, you can look to the children and say, what does it mean to actually live? What does it actually mean to be curious or interested in life or have enthusiasm for life? You can see that. Next up is going to be Laura. Laura, what is your experience with comprehensivism? Go ahead.
Okay, I have to unmute. Right?
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I unmuted. I'm on a computer now for the first time, and so I haven't touched this thing. All right. Am I unmuted?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Well, okay, my experience, I don't know where to begin. I have to say, from a personal perspective, this has been a phenomenal experience. I've learned that I'm a Stoic and a polymath, and so those are two interesting features. And I also feel that as these topics emerge and submerge, and I kind of get this, I paint this picture all the time of an abstraction. Like sometimes we see things and we see just sort of we see the line, we see the geometry of it, the movement of it without the detail. And then sometimes we get down into the gritty of it, and then we start to put the form together, and the function. So, and I when I work, I look at forms, build forms that create the kind of the geometric function. And so for me, that's all a function. It's all that kind of action. I like the systems. I very much, and I guess this is where my math background kind of comes into play all the time as well. And so I'm learning a lot all the time. I think I've learned a tremendous amount from each individual in this group. I mean, just a phenomenal group of people. I always tell people that this group is just filled with the smartest people you can imagine. I mean, it's not one of these, kind of people chit chatting, but these are really intelligent people that come and bring their thoughts. And I'm finding my education, or my lack thereof, has been brought out to me. And I only hope that I can catch up someday to the level where these folks are. I don't think there's so many books I haven't read. The books I was influenced by and the people through my time. Malcolm X really influenced me, as well as Reverend King, Martin Luther King and Jesse Jackson, and books I read during that time. I remember very much the author is Zinn, and I can't remember his first name, but it was a really interesting treatise on the state of politics at the time. And maybe it was Howard Zinn. I don't remember. Anyway, his last name was Zinn, and it was a really good, powerful book. I also remember reading a really interesting book. It was called Universities for All, and it was written in the 60s when colleges state universities were opening up their doors to with open admission and free tuition, and that changed the whole structure of college and university, and basically I think changed the whole structure of education, secondary education, the importance of a degree, and change kind of the whole marketplace and our economy in many ways. I also thought, I remember reading quite a bit about Eleanor Roosevelt, and she was pretty amazing for her day, and she did a lot, and I don't think people realize how much she contributed to in the communities, into marginalized communities and so forth. And I guess I could go back further, but I think I'll stop there. I mean, certainly there are a lot of historical characters that I found fascinating, but right now, in the here and now, this group and what we're doing is really interesting to me. And comprehensiveness, I think, is important, because I think we need to look at totality often and not get caught up in the nitty gritty of things. I think we really need to get, what is it, I forget what 30-mile high picture of things. More often we get too caught up and we forget where we came from, what we need to look at, because I think that will help us better figure out what our society should look like. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you very much, Laura. Really appreciate that. I wanted to follow up on one aspect. People have talked about individual people. Brian brought up Churchill, and he made the comment that person is far more complex than you think. Or looking at Ben Franklin and saying, okay, what is behind this? And each of these, Max and Laura brought up Martin Luther King. You have to realize the depth of these people, because that's one of the things I like to do. It's like, if I find somebody whom I find incredibly good, and spending the time to see how they are put together, because many times people are just focused on one thing. You know, everybody looks at one aspect of Churchill, but there is a whole things behind, lot of things behind. Ben Franklin, of course. Ben Franklin is special. He's in a completely different category, I think. Just incredible person. But there are many such people, and the richness is amazing. So next up is going to be Abram, followed by Joe. Abram, go ahead.
Yes, good to be here. I'm going to take a stab at this. This is a little complex within itself for me. I usually think and try to put things together. I believe in frameworks, patterns, consistencies, formulas, and emotional intelligence to try to figure out what's going on. And I believe that once you, like, no matter what we do in society or in the world or what you learn, there's a pattern to why we do what we do and how we do it. And I found myself very attracted to books about the brain structure, and human behavior and language, how all these things so come together. And if you're not really paying attention to it, it really rules our life. How culture, it affects language, and in return, language and culture has this crazy dance they do as far as how it structure our lives and how we do things between the culture, the language, back the language, the culture, and you look at how they work together. So I find myself looking at these, I think they call it the great courses now. They're college courses, and anything that's associated with human behavior, the brain, and social studies, I find myself attracted to it because it helps me figure out why we are where we are and why we do what we do, because the pattern seems like it never changes. Just our outside appearance change, but there's certain things as humans we constantly do over and over and over again, and it all ties back to our brain. You know, when we look at some of the most hideous things we do, it's really comes from our monkey brain and things that we really haven't, I won't say developed, but we haven't noticed that's where it's coming from, these origins. And even though we developed in many ways as a species, there's certain things that we just can't get over until we recognize where they're coming from. And that's a part of that consistency and pattern I'm always looking for in our behavior. And there, the other thing is the frameworks. Like, you could take the framework of politics, and it's almost the same as the framework of religion. There's certain things you know, if you step back and with an open mind, you can say, I see that everywhere. I see that in family structure. I see it in religious structure, and politics, in church structures. It's the same thing, but just the outside is different, or the label is different. But our human behavior is very, very shaped by our culture and things we do just over and over again. And I hope I did that justice as best I could. So I appreciate that it's time for speaking.
Thank you, Abram. So I'll say two things. One is about patterns, the power of patterns, because, and you really need to kind of look at various things across a lot of time, across different fields, in order to see really deep patterns. And you're saying, oh, the same thing has been going on. The same thing is going on in all these different fields. And the same thing in one form or the other has been going on over all this time. So I think the patterns are very deep, of saying, okay, what patterns are governing what is going on. The second point that you're making is about the brain. I think that's a crucial point. Part of it is that you kind of have to understand our evolutionary heritage. You're talking about the monkey brain. We carry our evolutionary heritage with us. No matter how advanced we are carrying all of that with us. And you see that operative. People, long before Darwin, people made up stuff about what human beings are, and they just talked about it. But you can't really understand the human beings fully unless you get the full force of evolution behind. The second point is about the brain itself. And that's one thing I'm really grateful to Sanjay for the meetups he's doing on neuroscience here. Because actually this point about polymathy or comprehensivism is clear when you look at the brain itself and the brain structure and how it changes and how, the plasticity of it. So to say that you're going to just limit yourself to this one particular thing and not look at the richness of everything that the life has to offer is to actually not use the brain fully, because using the brain fully and being able to make those connections is going to actually empower you to do exactly the same thing that you want to do. It just brings more to bear on it. So and it so happens that neuroscience, the study of the brain, is going through a golden age. So we are learning so many new things every day about it. And these are not minor things. These are core things about who we are. And the last thing I want to say in passing about patterns is one of the powerful patterns that you can see is about language. And we've been doing a number of meetups on language and how language, what role language plays in all of this. There are ideas of Julian chains. When I first discovered them, they really shook me up, saying, what is, that's why I'm a big fan of writing. What writing can do to your brain. We are creatures who can self-program ourselves to considerable degree. And Abram was talking about habits that we have. You have to be aware of your habits. And it's only by kind of looking around other people and in a wider context, you can notice that, oh, I am actually having this habit, because the way in which habits work is that they become part of you and you just regard them as being yourself. But it is a product of what you've been doing. And so that's a profoundly liberating idea. Thank you, Abram. Next up is going to be Kevin, followed by Joe. So folks, I'm going to give preference to people. I'm going to give priority to people who have not spoken before. But if you want to chime in again, you're always welcome to do that. So it's going to be Kevin, followed by Joe. Kevin.
Thank you, Frank. I agree most people.
Kevin, could you speak into the mic?
Now get it better?
Yes.
Yes. I agree most people, talk about it today, appreciate it. And two people Mako talk about chess. That's how amazing that school, they notice that. The chess itself, it's how rules, how, different role play. It's like you can mimic society, like Abraham talk about culture, language, so a politician, even an organization. It's just that's why it's so powerful. Abstract those concepts, to hierarchy level. I'm not sure it's purposely or there's a few people research that they should have this, some kind of subject to independently learn those, because it's going to benefit for everyone. It's not just for individual. We individuals learn a very specific thing. Let's see, math going deeper. Each level you learn, you can from lateral thinking and lateral learning other subject. I don't want to go into detail. We mentioned here it's inductive reasoning. It's like bottom up logic.
Mhm.
Like we from school, we learn is from top down. They already formed those things. It's if you can we imagine like a student or learner from bottom up? Let's see, it's like open mind, exploration, curiosity, approach learning. They form their generalized concept. Let's compare the common one, or build own statistical and historical experience. Then they put an analog, and we mentioned the Bayesian thinking and predict the other subject or something even further. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up here. So I appreciate that we discuss further. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. There was a great point about inductive versus deductive. Like most of the education has a certain, I don't know. I have very, very low regard for most education today, because I don't think it respects learning. It is trying to give you products of learning without ability of learning, in a way which actually harms the ability of learning. So if you say that you're going to start applying everything top down, then it's like you're saying the goods are here, the ideas are already here, and I'm going to try to apply it. That's going to stop your ability of actually doing the induction of where do ideas come from, and how do people come up with ideas. So I think that part is crucial. And for that, you have to be really, your first value has to be reality. You have to kind of be willing to encounter the world in human beings and everything, and be able to kind of take in what you're learning and then have the dialogue. So I think that the inductive versus deductive approach, I think too much of learning, quote unquote learning, is deductive. And I think inductiveness, you also mentioned kind of lateral thinking. That's also a very powerful way of doing induction, kind of going sideways. Next up is going to be Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, just briefly. Because I in looking at the description, is that some of the people that have presented here, that I find that, we've talked about people we hold in high regard, and all the people that have presented here, have given their time, and I think about Rob and Sherry and everybody that's taken time to teach us how to write, or about Louis Sullivan and things along those lines. But there's one person in particular that, and I don't know if she's been on Comprehensivist Wednesdays, but she's been a regular, is Rapali.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is because she really is reimagining how education can be. And so when we talk about these ideas of being childlike and what that really means, she's actually doing it. And she's enabling people's minds not to be essentially bound by the current systems that we that we were the way we think about education. And so if we're talking about people that we have to hold in high regard, I think in my opinion, you know, she really is living that. And because we talk so often about not being constrained to, you know, to conventional wisdom. And so for me, that I thought that was really important to mention. And so anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Absolutely. You know, thank you very much. You know, Rupali is a dear friend. I've known her for like 20 years now. And it's, you know, it's really interesting. Like my parents in India watch her videos, and their first reaction was that, wait a minute, why is it that she's just focusing on, why is it that only kids get to learn Shakespeare? We want to learn Shakespeare. So they have made a deal that they are going to recite some Marathi poems to her, and she's going to recite some English poems. So they formed a private poetry group across the earth in order to just do poetry, in order to, but it's you know, Rupali is very it's remarkable, because the foundation there is Montessori. Montessori system, you know, Maria Montessori really expresses the view of a child, because education depends on what you think a child is. And Maria Montessori holds that a child is an independent being, and the learning is initiated by the child. What the school can do is to provide a rich environment and a teacher who is watchful, who can take care of problems if they show up, and offer opportunities when needed. But it's mostly, it's the child, which is the prime mover. It's the seed. You can only provide good ground, good soil for the seed. And that's the idea. And Rupali has done a magnificent job. So I would recommend her interview on Montessori. So if you search for Montessori, you'll find it. She's also connected ideas of Louis Sullivan and Montessori. And there is one video that she did with one of her students and one of her teachers, which is particularly good. So it's called Louis Sullivan and Education. So if you go to the 52 Living Ideas YouTube channel, you'll see that. So I definitely you know, love what she's doing. So she's wonderful. Thank you. So folks, what I want to do, it's about 10:10. So what I want to do is, this is small enough group, and this conversation is very deep and very good. So what I want to do is I want to continue it in this group, because it's kind of only slightly larger than a breakout room. What I want to do is now I want to move to questions. So what are the big questions on your mind? So I'm going to quickly recap a few things that have been said. Maybe it's not necessary. So let's start with questions. And then if needed, I will go ahead and recap things a little bit later. So folks, so questions about comprehensivism. What questions would you like to ask? What questions would you like to put on the table? What challenges do you face? What's the next step for you? So the biggest question on your mind about comprehensivism, about this entire idea of being open to all fields, all of the world, and pursuing and trying to put together things. I like Buckminster Fuller's formulation of it, macro-comprehensive and micro-incisive, which is a crucial part of that. So you're kind of taking in as much, and then when you are actually doing things, you're bringing all of that to bear on this one point to make it incisive. So questions. So we'll list all the questions, and then we will go ahead and answer all of them. Everybody gets to ask questions, and everybody gets to answer the questions. Joe, what's your question?
I don't want to put you on the spot, but what are the positives and negatives of systems thinking?
Okay,
I mean, so we've talked a little bit about, you know, what
sure.
Center for Digital Learning is, and I've been trying to think about what are the negative parts of the systems thinking.
Sure. Okay. Anybody else with questions? Abram, I don't know whether I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Can you pronounce your name, please?
Yes, it's Abraham or short for
Abraham.
Abram.
Okay,
Abram
go
is
ahead.
good. Yes. My question, I think it may be a little different. Can we, people like us that like to think, like to learn, like to read and dig into things, can we spend so much time learning and digging and not coming up with anything that is like any kind of application to all that knowledge to move society forward? You know, like we're learning, but what are we going to do with all this knowledge to help this modern day situation? Can we be doing too much thinking? That's my question.
Excellent question. So is there anything like learning without application? And can you be doing too much of learning without application? Excellent. Anybody else who wants to put questions on the table? Okay, let's see. Kevin, what's your question?
My question is, should the school open the class like comprehensive class or polymath? Think about this. How can they later thinking that during the week what they learn, or let's see, abstract the ideas to their own concept, then compare with existing normal. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So should school open comprehensivist class? And if so, how would you do it? Okay, so we got some questions. Does anybody else want to add any questions at this point? Just questions at this point. Abraham.
Yes, I have another question. I don't want to put you on the spot, but this is for you.
Please feel free to put me on the spot. That's
okay.
a good place to be in.
With all the information you absorb, you love this stuff. I get a kick out saying you just eat this up like a sponge. Is there anything that you can put together that is a construct or a roadmap that we can use today to get us over maybe one hump of or past the obstacles that we're dealing with? I mean, like if you had to put together a curricula or something that we could say, okay, let's look at this roadmap or look at this blueprint. Is there? That's my question.
Okay, very good. Roadmap or a curriculum that will be helpful. Excellent question. Okay, Julie's question. Julie, can you go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, in the meantime, I had a comment to what Abraham just said.
No comments right now, just questions.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
We'll
my
get
question
chance
is
to do comments after.
Okay. My question would be, why isn't there more attention given to models that work in this life, whether it's education or gasoline, whatever? There's so much focus on the negative instead of models that work, and I think we can learn so much.
Very good. Why isn't there more focus on models that work? Okay. Anybody else? Last chance. All right, let's see how we're doing on time. 10:15. Okay, so we've got really interesting questions. Let's see. Let's start with, so we got Joe's question about positive and negative impacts of systems. We'll probably come to it last because it is much more narrower than the other questions. Abraham talked about learning without application. Then Kevin talked about, can schools teach comprehensivism? Abraham asked about, can you construct, a map, a roadmap, or curriculum that would be useful to people? And Julie asked, why is it that people focus on negative models instead of positive models that work? Okay, so I'm trying to decide between the school and learning. Let's do learning without with application and without application. So that's the question. Okay, so how do you make sure? I'll put it this way. I mean, that kind of betrays my direction of thinking about it. Like, how do you make sure that what learning you're doing actually improves your life? What do you need to do? How do you make sure that you're not just like a butterfly going from place to place without actually drinking anything and getting anything from it? How do you make sure that you can actually apply? So that's the question for anybody who wants to answer it. Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you would like to provide your answer. Joe, what's your answer?
My answer is that the progress that you make isn't always going to be immediate. So you're not going to come here, get a model, walk out of here, apply it to your job tomorrow. It's going to be comprehensive. After a little, it's iterations of learning, and it's putting concepts together that all of a sudden then things start clicking a little bit more when you're in the workplace. And I think that's where things that you start to, it's a habit you're building of learning. So I think that it's something where you come in and the idea that it's a gradual process that you'll start to see progress in other areas of your life. And I think that's where you know if you're making progress at all. Like, you just start to see little incremental things where you look at the world differently. And I think that way I think that you can measure the progress, deep down inside whether you're measuring, whether you're making progress or not. Measurements or metrics per se can be a challenge. And when you're talking about self-improvement or even just lateral thinking or things along those lines.
Excellent point. Okay, I'm going to take in what everybody's saying, and then I'll try to summarize it. Next up is going to be Dave, followed by Max. Dave.
Well, I will quote Alice in Wonderland. If you don't know where you're going, chances are you won't get there. And I think it's a problem that most people don't confront, but to find out where you want to go. I've counseled young people occasionally, and you can find these things online, but it's called a skills inventory or an interest inventory. Two different tools to narrow down where you might want to go, because our education is wonderful, but it's for paper dolls. It's not tailored to the individual, and you need to find your individual strengths and what you would have fun doing, and also might want to work with a mentor, someone in the education system or just an old person, but to help steer it a little bit, because to me that's a big problem in life is where to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Next up is going to be Max, followed by Gene. Max.
Thank you. For me, the way that I try to keep things, putting things into practice. So even if it's a theory or perspective, I immediately put it into practice. Even if it's like from Charles Bukowski or from Sartre, when I read it and like there's a perspective, like Charles Bukowski one time he said there were beautiful nothings. So I said like, what would that be in action? So if I judge other people, if I would see this group of people and I would agree like they don't have any like dirt on them, they don't have any actions, they don't have any like story behind them, they would be like beautiful nothings. Like how could I counterbalance that in my daily life to make sure that I'm not a beautiful nothing in theory? So it could be like my theories, the things I'm thinking about. They're not like untested things. They're not like unpracticed philosophies. It's like my life is a kind of reflection of the things I accumulate, of the things I study, of the things I learn. I wouldn't really have to say it because it shows a lot in my actions. So I think that's a big way to kind of stop from just, the analysis, the paralysis by analysis, where you're just analyzing everything, you're not, doing any actions. So instead, I actually put the actions into the things that I study, into the things that I learn.
Excellent point, Max. We'll come back to that one. That's a great point. Next up is Jean.
Yeah, there's a Chinese saying called learning and practicing. There's endless joy. I think it's very important to integrate what we learned into practice. Actually, the reason I like this this forum because it's very practical. It doesn't really because I'm in Seattle. I also try to find other philosophy group in the area. I found they're more deep into one branch of one specific, philosophy, and it's not totally relevant to life. And we all come here for some reason. I actually start my self-development journey because I try to motivate my son in the teenager. That's how I started. Then I learned so much myself. I think once we learn something, we change inside out, our mindset change, then everything else will gradually change. Like Joe mentioned, gradually changed. So it doesn't have to happen one day, but you plant a seed there. Then your inside change, your will change, your behavior will change. It's not just skills you learn, like superficial skills. It's Dao. You learn the Dao, then you don't need to learn the trivial skills. They will come naturally. I think that's what I believe, how the learning transform ourselves and it become part of the practice in the end.
Wonderful point. So I wholeheartedly agree with everybody here. I think it's kind of like this is all about living and living well. That's the purpose. So application, is natural. That's the purpose of learning. That's as far as I can see. And as Joe was saying and Jean was saying, there is you have to respect time. There is like seed that is trying to grow, and you have to build up the ground. You have to keep building the ground, make it richer and richer. Now, it doesn't mean that as soon as you put fertilizer, the seed is going to go 1 foot high. It's going to operate in its own time. The second thing is that intention, as Max was saying, what does this actually mean in real life? What does it mean in action? And insisting and going back to it again and again, and applying it as best as you can at every given point in a continual basis is critical. The way I try to do it, I'm not very good at it, but the way I try to do it is that I try to, whatever ideas are there, I try to connect the ideas together to kind of see relationships between ideas. So they are kind of like a unified system that I'm applying. And so everything new that I'm taking, I'm trying to kind of re-challenge all my ideas and then continuously saying, what do these mean in action? So action is kind of indispensable. So that's why I like that Buckminster Fuller's quote on macro-comprehensive and micro-incisive. So micro-incisive part is all about applications, of bringing that to bear on that. But the actual trajectory in which the larger part is brought to bear on that point, that can take time, that can vary. what points you can bring that to bear also can vary. So you might start by saying, okay, this is going to help me in this, but you might find that it will actually help you in that and that, which had nothing to do with that. So the actual way in which the learning can help you on applications, that is quite unpredictable, I would say. So the way I see it is that I'm committed to learning because learning in principle increases your capacity to get more out of life. Different people, so you need to have the purpose, purpose is critical. The formulation of John Boyd I like, you're trying to increase your capacity for independent action. Okay, that's the most beautiful formulation I see. So you're learning in order to increase your capacity for independent action, and you always kind of keep coming back to that. All right, next up is going to be Donna.
So the way I kind of see it is that it's about freeing, that all of the thoughts are there available to us. What I experience a lot, which really moves me deeply, is when I'm reading something, it resonates deeply with me, like, I don't know, like I felt it before, like it already exists. And it confirms something that's deep within me. And that's really very exciting. I think with that is having the openness to really be present with the insight or perspective that's there from the new information. It's almost like, all these millions of colors that are just so beautiful and there for us to take in and experience. And I think that's a key piece too for me, is to enjoy the journey, enjoy the learning itself. Just that's beautiful. Sometimes I don't have goals, sometimes I don't think, but to absorb it, like, I don't know, like being a sponge, and it just feels wonderful. And sometimes I guess, I think it applies, naturally. Sometimes I don't think I force it to. There are other areas that I feel that I have to with greater effort, so it might be more of an individual thing too. Having awareness of feedback from the world around you and others in terms of areas that you need to develop and work on. I don't know, hopefully that makes some sort of sense.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Donna. Really appreciate that. Next up is Julie. Julie, go ahead.
Yeah, following up with Donna and answering Abraham and my own question about why don't people pay more attention to things at work. I think that this call is something that works, and in the habit of the world where it just does, people, we have a common goal here, which is finding truth. It's more important than being right. There is such a we can disagree and appreciate the differences and learn and be open-minded. That's how life always seemed like it should be to me, but I just don't find it out in the world. You don't have good role models of respect, and because I've got the I guess bad habits of from living, I can use as much truth and as much health as possibly I could get. rewire myself and come from a place of the solution rather than the problem. So it's a very much a source for gratitude for me.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Julie. On this issue of application and learning, I want to bring in a very different perspective, the Chinese perspective. I've been studying the Tao Te Ching, and Tao Te Ching is very different in its approach to this. This is, by Lao Tzu. It's a beautiful book. I actually recommend it quite highly. It's very short, and it's very poetic. It's just 5,000 Chinese characters. Of course, I don't read Chinese. I recommend a translation by Ursula Le Guin. She's a science fiction writer, so she has got this artistic flair. So she has these 81 poems. That's it. Takes me all of like 1.5 to 2 hours to go through the entire book. And I've read multiple times. Its approach is very different. And I'm planning to do some meetups on it. I don't understand it, but I'm planning to do the meetups on it. So that's the way in which I'm hoping to understand it better. But its approach is very different. What it is saying is that respect nature, respect the world, and act according to it. Now, the Western approach is far more focused on what are you trying to get done, and then look at the world as an afterthought. Whereas this is a exactly opposite approach. It's saying that start with the world and see how the world is working. What's the way of the world? And act according to it. And the actions are quite gentle, but they are very well chosen and well calibrated. And I think there is a lot to learn from that approach. So that's just a thought, and I'm hoping to do something on that. I want to go to the next question by Abraham on can I, you're trying to, he was good enough to put me in a spot. So let me use the spotlight and talk about this. Can I use what I'm learning to construct something which will be a roadmap, a curriculum for helping people in some way? Now, I think that this meetup, for example, and the meetups that I do is the best means that I have found of actually doing that. I'm choosing some things primarily based on my interest, but my interests are very general interest. I'm mostly interested in human beings and how human beings can make their life better by understanding themselves, other people, and the world. That's what, it's about exploration and about self-improvement. And the thing that separates this from, it may not seem like a curriculum, but this goes to the heart of kind of comprehensivist method. I think that we can learn better. Firstly, I don't know much. Okay, so I don't have much to say. There are incredible people who show up, who add their own thoughts. There are many, many things that people say that I have not thought of. And that is true for, I'm sure, for most people here. So it's a difference between top-down learning and kind of peer-to-peer learning. It is very focused. I keep it very tight. You have to follow those rules of keeping on topic, not interrupting people, being brief, being courteous. And what that makes possible is actually this very rich exchange of ideas between thoughtful people. And I think that's a much better learning environment than anybody lecturing and person simply taking in stuff. So, so Abraham, that's my solution to actually making difference. And I don't presume to know how each person operates. Each person has their own goals, own abilities, own interests, and it's up to individual people to kind of take whatever they can from whatever is being done by all these people, put it together themselves. You have to do it. Each person has to do it their own way. People are different. Their contexts are different. What will strike one person may not strike the other person. So the responsibility of actually making something that makes a difference is with each of us independently. But this provides like a learning base and a learning environment. You have an opportunity of saying your thoughts. You have opportunity of asking questions, answering questions. And I think this is a very powerful way of doing education. And I'm experimenting with it to see what can be done. So Abraham, that's my answer to, in terms of how I can use my learning to create like a system to help people learn and improve their lives. So I would appreciate any comments. So I've just made a statement. I don't know. Please let me know whether this is something that is interesting. What do you think of it? How is it different from your previous learning? What are the limits of it? Especially I would like to know, what am I getting wrong about this? Because this meetup is a very, classic example of it. There is nobody kind of putting too much. Everybody is able to put a lot on the table, and everybody is able to ask questions. So Kevin, what do you think?
Yes, thank you. Your Dorje pronunciation is good.
Thank you.
That's good. Approach you will find a more common about it. About how can I build a roadmap, a blueprint? Actually, we on the path build our own blueprint. How do we learn each other? For example, you want the spotlight. Compare your question. The question, I believe you don't have a clear question ask. Sometimes you do. It's a great question. You say, you inspire me, ask some question most time. Mm-hmm. Post question. I know you sometimes you don't take it. I take it too. Yeah, that's other people. It also inspire other people, I would say. How is thinking, how let's see, connect idea like you're saying. And it's awesome. I would say no complaint. If everybody do the same, the world will be different. You can, let's see, with Christian, we can talk to Muslim, right? Mm-hmm. Like, let's see, the colored people talk to the non-colored people, mm-hmm. So it's because your purpose is correct, everything makes smooth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. And thank you for the compliment on pronunciation. Next up is Joe.
Yeah, I mean, how can this serve as a blueprint? I think that in meetups in the past that we've discussed the idea of learning by teaching. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a very important thing that this absolutely is, that can serve as a blueprint for you're actually engaged with learning, and that you're actually having to form a question very quickly in a short amount of time and make your point. And I think being brief is a critical part of that. And I think that serves is something where you can start to synthesize your thoughts, and then you can actually take that after the meetup or away from the meetup and say, where can I become a little bit more precise? Where can I start to think about things differently? And then you're also getting everybody else's perspectives on that as well, and seeing how they arrived. So you're engaged, but you're also getting something out of it. And I think that's where this becomes a roadmap, is that it's continuous engagement. And then you got to be okay with the you have to be comfortable with maybe sometimes not being so clear. You know, the idea that you're putting yourself out there. I think that's an important part of this. So I think that's I think these questions at the end are important, are a new way of engaging, and that's a blueprint as well.
Thank you, Joe. I do like the idea of kind of learning by teaching. That's a huge thing, because what happens is that when you initiate something, as opposed to just being passive, taking in stuff like TV, it's like when you're actually teaching something, you actually learn a lot more. Anybody who has done presentations here will know that. Just kind of preparing for it, or even just preparing to speak or say, what do I have to say? Preparing to formulate the questions. And what is the big question on my mind? That generates a lot more. And then you get feedback from people. And everybody is very courteous. So even when they disagree with you, and they're very honest with you also. So they will tell you where they disagree as well. So it's really very powerful. So it's going to be Abraham, Jean, and Michael. Abraham.
Yes. Thanks for answering that question. I learned a little bit more about you by you responding. As you know, this is maybe my 7th meetup, so I'm still new to learning everyone and the format. And I am very impressed with the format. And I tell everyone about you guys and how this is a hidden gem that I wish a lot more people would engage, because of where it takes us mentally, emotionally, and learning how to communicate, understand, and respect one another. That's one thing I really like about this this platform, this meetup. And the other thing is, I think I get you and I accept what you say, but I think you have a lot more to offer the world outside of this group than you may know right now. I'm just coming from a platform where this is what I do for a living. I observe, I learn, and I listen to people. And I can hear what people bring to the table, and their vision, or sometimes maybe they may not even know their own gifts or what more they have to offer outside of, their comfort zone or what they have always done. You have an awesome platform here. I love it. I talk about it all the time. And I do get the learn by teaching. That is awesome. I like that. I'm going to use that phrase for sure. And I appreciate you. Thank you. You are a mentor to me. And I really, really love being here. And just keep up the good work, buddy.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Abraham. And I'm going to put my email in the chat. Feel free to, I'm always open to any kind of ideas, The thing is that I always want to know what I'm doing wrong, where I'm kind of acting in a very limited way. Because what happens is that no matter how hard you try, you become a creature of habits. There are limits, and somebody else can actually see them better than you do. So Abraham, if you have any ideas, just go ahead and send me an email. Would love to hear from you. Thank you. Next up is going to be Jean, followed by Michael. Jean.
Yeah, I think I understand the question is because I'm trying to do it myself one time. I'm trying to have this knowledge tree. Basically, there's everybody in life, we encounter different challenges in life. try to improve our life. And we have common things we have to figure out. And I actually learned a lot through this forum on different topics. And I was always imagine when the person you learn from the basic knowledge, then you branch into more specific. But there's a key thing like Carl Jung. If you want to learn psychology, you have to learn about Carl Jung, personality, all these archetypes. So I think we have covered so much in this forum. There's a structure of knowledge like this topic. This is the main people need to know. And then there's a link of the videos, and this is more details you want to learn. So I think it's much easier for people if they just come in like map, knowledge map for meaning. So it's a knowledge map of 5 to living ideas. I think that'd be marvelous.
That's a great idea of creating a map. I've thought about it. But that's a great idea. I've actually thought of kind of doing like a web page, homepage, which is just a map, and people can just click on it and it just goes to different playlists, different videos, and but yeah. So let me. I'll work on that. Thanks, Gene. Next up is Michael.
I wanted to comment on the learn by teaching point that came up before. Because for me, it's also to me almost like a Taoist circle, that it seems listening to everybody here that we're all kind of teachers and seekers at the same time. And I found as someone who's been teaching for many years that if it's in my specialty, that sometimes it becomes rote. And the words are coming out of my mouth, and I realized that I've taught the lesson a lot of times. And what I found very helpful is to always be doing something at the beginner level. For example, when I was very young, I was a drummer. But I live in an apartment, so I can't play the drums, but I have a bass guitar that I put headphones on so nobody can hear me. And I'm really bad. I mean, but I do it because, I'll watch a video on YouTube and I'll force myself to follow and learn, and then no video and just have the guitar in my hand and try to learn something on my own. And I found it a great help in my teaching, because what happens is, let's say I spend an hour doing that, just really struggling. When I go to teach the next day in class, I kind of have the beginner's mind, not in the back, it's more in the forefront now, which I think's helped, because I think it's always good that if you have expertise, you should be able to distill that information down to the beginner or to the intermediary level. So to me, it's almost like a Taoist circular type dynamic. I found it interesting.
Yeah, beautifully put. Beautifully put. Josh Waitzkin makes this point really well. Like when he talks about, so he was a, quote unquote prodigy, chess prodigy, and he had a tremendous amount of success. He had like 8 national championships, and then this movie came out. It was like 16, and that actually threw him off. The quote unquote success and all the attention he got, he basically, the way he put it very beautifully, before the movie, the chess was a personal thing for him. It was like a private passion, and it was internal struggle of saying, okay, what can I do? And that's how he looked at chess. As soon as their fame came, he kind of started thinking, okay, I'm seeing myself from the eyes of others. And then it's a question of, okay, I have to win now. And that actually destroys your love. For he says, I was separated from my love of chess as a result of that. And what he did was that he went to do Tai Chi. Actually, it's actually right a few blocks from my place, where the master, I forget his name, but he's incredibly good. And there he was just one of the guys trying to practice Tai Chi. And he was at a very low level. And what happened was that he says he was kind of reborn. It's like the rekindling, because it's the beginner's mind that is crucial. No matter, and all the great thinkers, like you look at Leonardo or Louis Sullivan, you see that freshness in them. No matter how much that they have achieved, there is that freshness, almost like a childlike curiosity of what can I do? What's new thing that I can do? What is possible? And they have their eyes are still as wide, or actually in most of these cases actually wider. They are like more like children as they grow older. And that's exactly, and it's beginner's mind it's the right concept. Thank you. Beautifully put. All right, let's go to the next question. And that is about teaching. Let's see how we're doing on time. So we'll take just this very briefly. So just very quick answers, okay? Because I want to wrap it up. Usually I try to wrap it up by 11 o'clock. You can go a couple of minutes over, but not too much. So the question is, how do you teach comprehensivism to kids? What are your ideas? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark. This is going to be the lightning round to crown, to kind of top it up. Top everything that we've been doing. So just quick answers, 1 sentence to 5 sentences at the most. Donna, how do we teach comprehensivism?
Get out of their way and don't ruin it for them. It comes natural. It is natural. We are born with it.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Joe, how do we do it?
I really was actually going to say something very similar to that. It was just like, just let them be children.
Yes.
I mean, so essentially let them be who they are, and yes, get out of their way.
Wonderful. Anybody else wants to add? That was a perfect answers, but you can go ahead. Kevin, what do you do?
One challenge for kids from school, let's say have homework, they try finish. They don't want to, think about it. That's a trick when you think about, let's see you doing this, you can think something else. How to keep them patient, or however, let's say give them some gift. Let them thinking even broader, deeper.
Thank you. Jean, how do we do it?
I think we need to shut down internet at their play areas. So they have to have downtime, no access to internet or games, computer games, and that really ruin their mind.
Wonderful. And my answer is Marshall McLuhan's idea of city as being the schoolroom. It's very odd. It's very odd. Like if you just kind of step back and look at it, right? The idea of school where for learning, you actually put this living being in these 4 walls, a little room, you make them sit down, okay, which is highly unnatural. And you expect to throw stuff at them and them to just passively absorb. What is this? This has nothing to do with learning. The world is out there. They are curious about the world, and just let them do it. And that's just the idea of, and that's what Montessori does, is that they kind of prepare the environment, which is analogous to a full-fledged environment, and are farming, not learning. It's very, very interesting. We have our guest this last Saturday. He actually runs a farm school. So what he does is that he is integrated doing with learning. So it's all integrated, and they're doing something. They're out there working on the farm and learning at the same time. All right, folks. So this was a fantastic meetup. Really appreciate it. Just thank you so much. I'll see you soon. Bye.